We have a quorum. May we have the roll call, please, Gail?
Mayor Sticks?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney?
Here.
Councilmember Blatz is not here. Councilmember Francina? Here. Councilmember Wyrick?
Here.
Thank you, Gail. And welcome to the Thursday, May 26th special meeting of the Ojai City Council. Bill, will you please do the pledge? Thank you.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And approval of the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, thank you. Very eager tonight. Move it. Okay, roll call, please, Gail.
Councilmember Francina?
Here.
Yes.
I was thinking something else about Ryan not being here yet.
Oh,
Okay, yes. I mean, yes.
Microphone?
Mayor Pro Tem Haney? Oh,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks?
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick?
Yes.
Councilmember Francina, if you could turn your microphone on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And
Thank you, Gail.
we have one discussion item this evening, the Active Transportation Project right-of-way acquisition. James, we have a report?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
And thank you, Council, for making the time. I apologize for having to call a special meeting. I wanted to start quickly because we've had many conversations about the ATP project, and I wanted to start just by saying up front that tonight's meeting is not about any sort of design review for the project. It's focused on basically a technical procedural issue that we received word from Caltrans regarding. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, but we aren't planning to go through any of the design or anything, which we had received direction from council on back in February. As I mentioned, we received word from Caltrans recently that although the city of Ojai has planned to proceed in this project by acquiring right-of-way that was needed for sidewalk improvements voluntarily through voluntary agreements with property owners. We were notified that because the project is on a state highway and funded by state and federal grants, that we would need to we'd be required to follow a formal noticing process. And most importantly, the formal noticing includes statements regarding the potential for eminent domain. And we wanted to take an opportunity to explain that both to the public and to the city council before sending these notices out to approximately 29 property owners that may catch people off guard or that may raise some questions. So I'll give a little bit of background to start, just for somebody who has no idea what the ATP project is. The ATP is our active transportation project. It's been an ongoing project since the original grant in 2014. It's a project to make improvements to both Maricopa Highway and Ojai Avenue that are intended to result in what are called multimodal improvements. Multimodal meaning improvements for cars, bicycles, and pedestrians. As I mentioned, the grant was initially applied for in 2014. In December of 2020, the city launched a demonstration project out on Maricopa Highway that many people are familiar with. And that resulted in the city needing it resulted in highlighting certain changes that were needed to improve the project. And so we've been working on those changes over the last year from 2021 to 2022. As we make those changes, we then have to confirm things like that the right-of-way acquisition is still in line with what was expected. The right-of-way acquisition, just for anybody not familiar, is things like right now, the sidewalk, for example, in certain areas is actually partially on private property. And so in most cases, we're talking about a few feet of private property that had extended into what was believed to be the Caltrans right-of-way, or maybe presumed to be the Caltrans right-of-way. And so as we've been redesigning the elements over the last year, we've also been working on making sure all of the requirements were met. And as we mentioned a moment ago, one of the issues that we had identified was that the right-of-way acquisition process had been initiated with the focus on voluntary agreement, but not following the Caltrans formal procedure. So let me see. So just to explain that a little bit, there are two main paths for right-of-way acquisition, typically voluntary acquisition, where the city would simply enter into an agreement with the property owner. And second would be eminent domain, which is a more complicated process where the city converts private property for public use and issues compensation for that property. The city had always planned to pursue this project with voluntary acquisition since it started 8 years ago. Staff had worked towards obtaining the property with voluntary acquisition and spent significant effort towards doing that. But as I mentioned a moment ago, recently we were notified that we still needed to follow the formal process, which would include the potential for eminent domain, even if we had only intended to approve or obtain via voluntary acquisition. So what we're asking for tonight is city council approval to send the notifications out. Again, we wanted to explain it. The formal process actually doesn't allow the city to contact property owners before we send these notices. So this is basically our opportunity to kind of give people a heads up. Again, 29 property owners along Ojai Avenue in Maricopa that what these notices are and explain it a little bit. We also, in the packet, prepared and kind of negotiated with Caltrans the ability to have a City of Ojai notice that gives them our contact information and tries to give them a little bit of information so that they can contact us if they're at all concerned or confused about what the notices mean. So we're here tonight to recommend approving that. I think, to be clear, approving the start of the Caltrans process does not approve any potential eminent domain. That would have to be voted on separately by the city council. And so tonight we aren't talking about that. It's just starting the notification process. We are still expecting and planning to obtain property or the right of way voluntarily through agreements with the property owners. And so with that, we're recommending approving or authorizing staff to begin that process. So.
Thank you, James. Any questions from council?
Do you, may I? Do you know why they don't want you to reach out prior to mailing the notices? Because the notices are friendly enough, I thought, the tone.
Yeah.
I felt was friendly.
And we worked with them on that to try to make them friendlier and a little more, we kept saying a little more Ojai focused. The answer really is, it's just one of the things with the state and federal guidelines we're finding is there are check boxes and you can't, veer outside of those check boxes. And one of them is you have to send the notice before you talk to them. And so we really pushed to try to kind of make the process fit more for Ojai. They worked with us in letting us, we said, prepare some of the language and things, but they had told us specifically we can't reach out before we send the notices.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Randy?
Yeah, we've already noticed these people. We've already knocked on their door. So did we break a rule, or are we in violation?
The idea would be this is going to correct the mistakes that were made in the past by restarting the process.
Okay, so I guess where I'm lost is if we've already done this, and I asked the question is, did we break a rule by going out to these people a year ago or the last public works director? Didn't he do it?
I believe so. I believe I was informed that the public works director had started this process. That does not follow the Caltrans procedures, so we are restarting the process. So
is the procedure more about eminent domain than it is about our thought process of how we'd like for you to work with us and give us your property?
I believe so. The concern Caltrans raised was if they always require everyone to go through the process because ultimately this is a state highway, they will never rule out the possibility of eminent domain. We've told them that the city has no plans to proceed that way, but that's why they want to make sure it's all done by the book following that process.
So then let me clarify that statement.
Mm-hmm.
So if we got down to, we have 29 parcels and we got down to 28 and one did not want to work with us, we would let one person stop us from proceeding?
No.
It would be that we'd have to have
That
a.
we're not gonna do eminent domain, and I'm saying that if we got down to 28 saying yes and one saying no, would we then use that process to complete this project?
We would have to have a approval from the city council. So it would be a council decision whether to modify the design,
Yeah.
to remove the one property that would hold out, depending on which property it is. In some cases, it could be more of a problem, but we'd either have to modify the design or get 4/5 approval to move forward.
I'm just trying to clarify your language, because you're saying we won't, and we haven't come to that decision.
Yeah, I do want to be careful because I don't want to say we won't, so I apologize if I said that. But what I've intended to say is that the city had always intended to pursue voluntary agreements and had never discussed eminent domain or never pursued eminent domain up to this point.
Pursue, but the discussion is taking place and probably should have taken place prior to today if we understood the Caltrans rules
Can we,
and regulations.
Randy, wait for discussion until after public comment, please?
I'm asking questions.
You're commenting right now.
No, we're asking questions.
Well, can you ask a question and not make a
I did
statement?
ask a question,
No, but you were just
and
making.
he's clarifying it, and I'm going deeper into it.
I think to answer what I heard is, yes, I think prior to this day, a conversation should have been held regarding the right-of-way acquisition.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a short
Yeah,
one.
go ahead.
So, doesn't this also, besides the notification of potential eminent domain, also basically it's the notice of decision to appraise? In other words, this is a notice that we are appraising this parcel,
Yes,
and that's a required step in the process?
yes,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
And it's interesting because Caltrans had said, their perception is that people, when they get these in some areas, downtown LA was their example, is some people are excited because it's basically somebody offering to buy part of the sidewalk that they never really, thought they owned or anything else. And so their perception was that this is not a major issue. We explained to them that this is not typical in Ojai, and getting these notices will cause at least questions, so that's why we wanted to just kind of explain it. So
I have one more question. So getting back to Bill's question about assessments, I read in our packet that it's also an opportunity for them to procure their own assessment, and that because I don't know how deep into the weeds in this packet we're going to go tonight, but it also gives them up to a budget of $5,000 that we would pay to have their property assessed.
yes, they could demand a second assessment, and and the city would, through the grant, would pay up to $5,000 for their second assessment. So
Okay. All right, let's move on to public comment. First, we have Bill Miley and then Larry Steingold.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Miley. For this evening's agenda in the right-of-way acquisitions, I've looked at the street mapping locations, and for some time, that some are temporary for construction and others are permanent. Just to let you know, I understand this. I continue to support the active transportation project from the beginning. I am impressed with the information materials crafted to inform property owners of the process and reasons, and the manner for questioning such acquisitions. I am also impressed with the policy decision of working towards a voluntary acquisition of the property. I have one question, and it's regarding the failure to obtain all right-of-way access or purchases. So the question would be, are there any right-of-way properties that includes substantial land that would compromise the owner's business or the land that they own. I would suggest in looking at that, that's probably not, doesn't exist. There likely should not be any resistance. But if one or more properties say no, then it seems to me the umbrella issue is how much acquisition contributes towards the public benefit. And I would say that's really high, the public benefit. So I certainly would support eminent domain if somebody resisted after learning everything about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Larry Steingold?
Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if this may be a segue from the ATP, and it's not for or against it, but the fact that the school department is thinking about building a swimming pool next to the Maricopa, and we're going to spend ungodly amounts of money pouring 15 feet of concrete and sand and everything else. Is there some way that the school department and the developers for the pool and the city planning department can work on one sort of access point for the utilities so they don't have to dig up the concrete that we just poured, right? Because they're going to take a big chunk of that sidewalk where they are and dig it all up to put down laterals and utilities and drainage and all stuff. So if that's going to cost whatever and we're going to spend it, maybe everybody can work together for once and come up with some sort of galleyway. I don't know. Let the engineers, let the developers, let whoever deals with it make the connection now, spend the money. Look, this is where the pool's going to go. If it's ever going to go, it's going to go here. Put the connection in, call it a day, and say that's where they're going to dig. And if they don't like it, because it's going to come out of the school budget and it's going to come out of our budget, and then we're going to have to redo it again and spend another $1 million pouring concrete when there's no particular reason to. So please, let's spend it on roads instead of having to repave concrete and redo the area where you're going to be doing this. And eventually, if 28 people say yes, more than happy, and one person says no, depends how big that person is, because you may end up with eminent domain or whatever. So good luck.
Thank you, Larry. Any public comments on Zoom, Gail?
If anyone in the Zoom queue would like to speak on this item, please use the raised hand function now.
Okay, let's move on to discussion.
I have another question. I don't feel too worried because we do have the option of just working around if someone doesn't want to do it. But my question is, since the eminent domain takes so long, can that be done, what's the word? Can we proceed and still be, or does everything have to happen at once?
So it is a concern at this point. There's not enough time to do eminent domain before some of the grants would expire.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so that's
my
part
question.
of why,
Okay.
you know, when the intent was to do the voluntary agreements for several years and then, you know, realizing it at this point, we wouldn't be able to go through the eminent domain process before one of the grants expires October of 2022.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is a concern. So that's where, you know, we have a few options like modifying the design if somebody held out, or another option that we've talked to Caltrans about preliminarily would be using that initial grant for the portion where we do get everybody to sign, you know, and so we'll be trying to work through that. It's a little bit of a challenge with all the Caltrans checks and balances. But so, did I answer your question? I guess.
You did.
Yeah.
You did. There's, we can work with.
Yeah,
it.
we have a
It's not
couple
black
of
and
ways we're trying to work with it. I think I think that is the answer. Yeah,
Yeah, I
thank
think
you.
I'm hoping for the best, you know?
So am I.
This is positive. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I'm
Red.
just going to say that I really appreciate the comments by both Mr. Feingold and Mr. Miley. They're germane, something to keep in mind, I think, both of those comments. But it seems to me this situation is there's really no downside to passing this tonight, because we got to start the process, and it leaves our options open. So with that, I'm going to make a motion to approve the notice to
We're
send
not
it out.
discussing it.
We can discuss the motion. If it's-
Go for it.
That's why I'm going to make the motion
Mhm.
to send out the notice of decision to approve letters and associated brochures, and to proceed with the right-of-way acquisition as recommended by staff. That's my motion.
I'll second.
We
Um,
discuss the motion.
Randy,
Yeah, so
comment?
just more questions. So to help Souza feel better, I'm not against the ATP. In fact, where we might be impacted is the corridor that I believe should have the priority, not Highway 33, that only has 2 impacts. But the downtown corridor is the most unsafe passage that we have in this community, and would have the best ability to utilize the ATP for enhancements. So contrary to what you may think, I am for the ATP, and I am also for bike lanes, just not the way these are designed and how these are going to be used. So, questioning this, are we going to, first of all, you listed in the packet that we have staff and consultants. Who's doing what? And is it going to cost us any more money? And when I say money, I'm looking at, do you have an estimate of how much staff time we might need at this point? And how much consultant time? And if we do have consultant, is that going to be more money that we have to come up with? That's the first question, and then I have a couple more to follow up on that.
Yeah. So the cost for the right-of-way work, which a big chunk of it's been completed already, but the total cost is $364,000. About 200,000 of that will be going towards the services and the acquisition. And so that is through our contractors who've been part of the ATP presentations in the past, Alta, and then they subcontract with a group that specializes on these called Epic. So they will be the group that is going out and meeting with property owners and actually negotiating the voluntary agreements. And so that is not staff, and that's kind of why we're at where we're at, is it's really not supposed to be city staff going out and doing that, and that was the mistake made a few years back. So those are the contractors that we use. That we did make sure to talk to both Caltrans and VCTC to make sure that if somebody held out, that is not, those are not dollars that we would have to pay back if somebody held out, for example. And VCTC did confirm to us that that would not have to be paid back if there was an issue.
So you're not looking at a lot of staff time yourself, that's what I just heard. And then what is the reporting back of facts? How does that work? Do they wait till have met with 29 owners and have come to some type of a conclusion or a result, or is it on a weekly basis? How are we gonna know where we are in the process? Because that comes to my last question is, and I say this all the time, failure to plan is planning to fail. At some point, Plan A, which is ATP as today, may fail. And at what point do you feel we need to start thinking of Plan B? Because failure on ATP as today is losing $2 million. So we got to be clear on that. We're not going to recover it. If in our conversations we have run out of extensions, unless there's a blessing somewhere hidden out there in the clouds that I don't know about. But so we're in a pretty strict time zone, and so the question is, at what point does this council want to make some form of a conclusion that we can't attain ATP as today and start planning for Plan B ATP? What's your thoughts on that, James?
I think, I don't think we're there yet, but I think this is probably the last conversation before we get to that point. I think at this point, our recommendation is to proceed. If they send out the notices and everybody's voluntarily agrees, we have plenty of time. If they have to do second appraisals, it's getting tight. If we have to do eminent domain, we're out of time. I think that's really it. We have started to talk about multiple different plan options. I think one point to keep in mind, because we really had to wrestle with this too, and one thing that we realize is that several of our grants actually do extend much further out. Actually, we have a couple of the grants that go to 2026, I think, and so it could be a case even where if somebody holds out and we do part of the project and then we have to apply for additional grants to supplement the future work and do more work, prior to that 2026 deadline. And I don't think we're there yet, but I'm just saying, as far as we're starting to think about what those alternative plans would be. But at this point, to answer your first question, every couple of weeks we have a what they call a PDT meeting that includes all the contractors and subcontractors and some of the Caltrans reps. And so that's probably the bulk of the staff time, is that we, both Alma and myself, are in those meetings and try and do coordinate a bunch of consultants. But we'll be doing those every couple of weeks. And I think what we would plan to do is give reports coming out of those whenever there's something to report. And ultimately, the next item that's going to come to council will be finalizing the design, and we'll definitely be reporting back at that point how this is going to impact that. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan, do you want to comment? Okay. Well, I agree with Bill that it's time to start the process and check the boxes, and it's great to give the folks the contact info, and I feel confident in staff that we can do this in a friendly Ojai way.
we're trying.
So we have a motion and a second. Could we have the roll call, please, Gail?
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Haney,
Yes.
Councilmember Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for being here, and quick and productive. So we're adjourned.
This is wonderful.
Thanks, guys, for showing